Imagine waking up tomorrow and nothing works. Not your bank app, not your car, not the electric system that powers your home, not the delivery network that brings food to supermarkets. The world looks normal outside your window, but inside every factory and every server room, screens are dark, machines sit cold, planes stay grounded, and nobody knows when anything will turn back on. This sounds like the opening of a science fiction movie, but the truth is much stranger than fiction. Our modern world depends on something smaller than a grain of rice. It is called a semiconductor chip, and it is the quiet heartbeat of the global economy. Without it, everything stops. Almost every object around you is powered by chips. Your phone is basically a pile of glass, metal, and plastic that comes alive only because of a tiny piece of silicon. The same goes for your laptop, smart TV, refrigerator, medical devices, satellites, and the cars moving through your city right now. Even agriculture uses chips inside tractors and sensors that monitor soil and weather. Chips are not just technology. They are the hidden oxygen of the modern world. And here is the terrifying part. Almost all of those chips come from one place on Earth. An island in East Asia, smaller than Switzerland, called Taiwan. Specifically from a single company, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. It produces more than 90% of the world's most advanced chips. The chips that power artificial intelligence, military systems, space technology, and the fastest computers ever built. If TSMC stops, the future stops with it. To understand why this matters, picture the global economy as a giant glass tower. Every floor represents a different industry. Energy, transportation, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, communications, and at the very bottom, supporting everything, sits the semiconductor industry. But under that industry, holding the entire tower above the ground, there is one single brick. TSMC. Remove that brick and there is no gentle wobble, no slow decline. The tower shatters instantly. Companies like Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, and even the US military rely on chips made in Taiwanese factories. America might be the world's biggest economy, but when it comes to silicon, it is deeply dependent. Europe too. Cars from Germany, medical systems from the Netherlands, telecommunications from the United Kingdom, and cloud computing used by millions of businesses across the world. All roads lead back to that same island. Why did the world allow this to happen? The answer is simple. Semiconductors are extremely hard to make. This is not like building a car or a smartphone. A chip factory costs more than an aircraft carrier, uses machines so precise they operate at the scale of atoms, and requires engineers who train for decades. You cannot start one in your backyard. Most countries tried, many failed, and only a tiny group succeeded. Taiwan became the champion because it made a strategic bet in the 1980s, focusing everything on mastering chip manufacturing. It did not chase brand names or shiny products. It chased precision, patience, and perfection layer by atomic layer. And the result? A company so advanced that even the world's richest corporations wait in line to buy its chips. Nvidia, the company feeding the artificial intelligence boom, cannot build its future without TSMC. Apple designs chips, but TSMC brings them to life. Intel, once the king of silicon, now depends on the very competitor it used to laugh at. Samsung produces chips too, but it is still behind in the most advanced generations. In the world of silicon, there is TSMC, and then there is everyone else. This might sound like a triumph story. In many ways it is. Taiwan became the guardian of the most valuable technology on the planet. But power has a dark side. And here it comes. Taiwan is at the center of a geopolitical storm. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory. The United States vows to defend it. Both sides understand one thing clearly. Whoever controls advanced chips controls the future. Artificial intelligence, next-generation weapons, global finance, quantum research, autonomous vehicles, space exploration. Everything is tied to semiconductors. And this is not just economics. It is a live wire of global tension. One miscalculation, one conflict, one blockade, and the world could slip into an economic ice age. Not because buildings will fall or money will disappear, but because the digital system that runs modern civilization could simply freeze. Think about the pandemic supply chain crisis. Factories shut down, ships backed up at ports. People fought over masks and toilet paper. Now imagine that stress multiplied by 1,000. But instead of masks, it is the processors inside medical ventilators. Instead of containers stuck at sea, it is cloud servers that cannot run. Instead of car factories pausing for a few weeks, the global automotive industry collapsing for years. People often imagine economic collapse as empty shelves and long lines at banks. But the collapse we risk now would feel different. Quiet, sudden, invisible. One day your card stops working, the next day airports close, then factories shut down, hospitals lose access to software, and global trade slows like thick honey. Not because humanity forgot how to build things, but because the core ingredient of the digital world has vanished. Meanwhile, governments are rushing to build chip factories. The United States has launched the CHIPS Act, pouring billions into semiconductor production. Europe has its European Chips Act. Japan and South Korea are racing too. Yet even with all this investment, experts say it could take a decade to recreate what Taiwan built. 10 years in technology is an eternity. 10 years in a global crisis would feel like a lifetime. That is why the world watches Taiwan like a fragile treasure. Because inside those ultra-clean labs and billion-dollar machines lies something more valuable than oil, more necessary than electricity, and more powerful than armies. The brain of the modern world, etched in silicon, thinner than a human hair, and sitting on a geopolitical fault line that never sleeps. To understand the scale of what we are talking about, imagine humanity building a digital cathedral over 3 decades, layer by layer, transistor by transistor, until it touched the sky. We built global finance on cloud servers, supply chains on real-time data, transportation on smart chips, healthcare on software, and national security on advanced computing. We created a world so connected, so automated, and so optimized that we barely notice technology anymore. It simply works, or more accurately, we assume it will always work. Yet the cathedral has a weakness, not in its walls but in its foundation. A single, fragile supply chain stretched across oceans, vulnerable to storms of politics, earthquakes of conflict, and the smallest errors in production. This is not fear-mongering. It is the quiet truth behind every smartphone tap and AI breakthrough. The semiconductor supply chain looks global, but in reality it is narrow. The most advanced chips are designed in the United States, Japan, and Europe. They rely on machines from a company in the Netherlands, ASML, whose technology is so advanced that only a handful of people alive fully understand how it works. These chips are then produced in Taiwan, partly in South Korea, and sent around the world to be built into devices. It is one of the most complex industrial chains ever created, and like a symphony orchestra, if even one player drops an instrument, the entire performance falls apart. People think economic collapse always comes from bad banks or failing governments. They imagine printing money, inflation, or debt crises. But the next collapse could start inside a chip factory. A laser calibration error, a trade ban, a cyber attack, a shipping disruption, or worse, a geopolitical confrontation in the Taiwan Strait. A modern economy is not destroyed by soldiers alone. It can be undone by silence. A silence inside a clean room where machines stop humming. The strange thing is that most citizens have no idea. They see headlines about inflation or interest rates. They hear politicians argue about taxes and jobs. But the invisible war over silicon decides far more about the future than any election cycle. Nations do not fight over farmland anymore. They fight over data, compute power, and technological sovereignty. And the battleground is a microchip smaller than a fingernail, holding billions of microscopic switches that turn the modern world on and off. So how do we protect this fragile system? Countries are trying to do it with money, with alliances, and with industrial policies. The United States wants to bring chip production back home. Europe wants to secure its own supply. Japan is rebuilding its semiconductor strength. China invests billions to catch up and reduce dependence. South Korea expands aggressively. And Taiwan continues to push the boundaries of engineering, creating chips at scales once considered physically impossible. But here is the real challenge. You cannot rush mastery. You cannot buy experience. You cannot shortcut physics. Building a semiconductor ecosystem is like growing a forest. You plant seeds, nurture engineers, develop suppliers, stabilize geopolitics, and wait years before the roots are deep enough to withstand storms. Meanwhile, global demand keeps rising. Artificial intelligence consumes chips like oxygen. Automation spreads, defense systems evolve. Cities become smarter. Cars become computers on wheels. Data becomes currency. The world accelerates and the dependence intensifies. There is also something subtle happening beneath the surface. Technology used to be a tool we controlled. Now it is becoming an environment we inhabit. When you remove technology from a digital society, it is not like shutting off a machine. It is like draining the ocean from a fish. We are not prepared to live without silicon. That is not weakness, it is simply the price of progress. But it means we have responsibilities to build redundancy, to invest in education, to treat semiconductor production not as a business, but as critical infrastructure for civilization. If this sounds dramatic, consider this. Every major power around the globe now treats chips as a matter of national security. Military doctrines reference them. Diplomatic strategies revolve around them. Intelligence agencies monitor supply chains like strategic oil routes. Chips are not widgets anymore. They are the nervous system of the world. This does not mean we are destined for collapse. Humanity rarely walks blindly into disaster when the warning lights flash bright enough. We are building new factories. We are learning from past shortages. We are training new generations of engineers. It will take time, but industries have risen from vulnerability before. The question is not whether we can solve this. The question is whether we act fast enough. If global semiconductor resilience improves, then the next era could be extraordinary. Artificial intelligence could accelerate medicine, energy research, climate modeling, and education. Chips could enable clean power grids, self-driving transport, and global communication systems that lift entire regions out of poverty. The Silicon Century could be our greatest chapter yet, but it starts with awareness. Modern life rests not on giants, but on microscopic gates made of silicon and light. The companies behind them are not factories. They are guardians of civilization's nervous system. The engineers designing and printing these chips in quiet, clean rooms far away from public attention are as important to stability as central banks or presidents. When they succeed, the world grows smarter. When they stop, the world pauses. So the next time you unlock your phone or ask an AI a question, remember this. The miracle you see on your screen is not magic. It is a fragile chain of human effort, physics, politics, and economic choices, all working in perfect coordination. Our future runs on chips, and the world's greatest challenge is not building more devices. It is protecting the heartbeat that powers them. If the world learns that lesson, the economy does not have to collapse. It can evolve, it can strengthen, and the digital cathedral we built can stand tall, not balanced on one brick, but supported by many hands across many nations, prepared for the storms of the future.